had the death of prominent individuals occur in the closing weeks of a campaign. But you're right, nothing this big, this close to a presidential election. Not that I can recall.
Yeah. And look, the president spoke about this today. In the midst of preparing for a hurricane, there aren't Democrats and Republicans. They're just Americans. If you watch over the past few days, the president and Governor Christie, I think, shows you what bipartisanship looks like. I don't think the overall impact will be anything more than minimal. You know, there's obviously been a number of reports and concerns about, you know, our polling place is going to be fully operational by next Tuesday for Election Day. I think that, you know, in each of these locales, state and local elections officials will do everything humanly possible and in their power to make sure that people have the right to exercise their vote on Tuesday, and I think are working diligently in those places, as you mentioned, that have in-person either absentee or early voting, and how that might be affected by the changing polling places. In 2000, when Carl was the architect of the Bush campaign, at this point in the race, there I think were 16 states that were still competitive and being fought about at this late date in the race. There's 9 states that are being actively contested.
As of Tuesday, 181,000 fewer Democrats had voted early in Ohio or had cast or requested an absentee ballot compared to 4 years ago. Now, they still have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and you can ask for an absentee ballot up to noon on Saturday. But 75,000 more Republicans had already voted this year than had voted in 2008. So it was a shift of about 257,000 towards the Republicans. President Obama won the state, won Ohio early voting, lost Election Day turnout, and won the state by 262,000. So if you've already got a shift in the early voting of about 257,000 votes, and Republicans are likely to win Election Day, then that's a problem. And you see this in other states around the country. I think that's representative of the fact that at least in this critical battleground state, and I see it in other states, the Republicans have fought the Democrats to at least a draw when it comes to it. In some instances, like Ohio, made significant gains compared to 4 years ago.
In some of these places too, the statistics are hard to compare to 4 years ago because there's less early voting. In a place like Florida, there were 15 days of early voting, and the governor and the legislature, based on the advantage that the president went into Election Day with 4 years ago, decided we'd have less early vote this year, so we have 8 days of early vote. So I do think some people that would have voted in the 15 days of early vote that don't vote in the 8 will vote on Election Day.
Both parties had roughly the same percentage, which was 90% of them had voted in 3 or 4 out of the last 4 elections, 10% hadn't. So at least in this state, you know, at least in this critical battleground state, both sides, while they're both endeavoring to do the same thing, find the episodic voter and get him to vote early, both of them were ending up with the same pattern, which was 3 out of 4.
Turnout is king, no doubt about it. Look, we got, a lot of people wrote a lot of stories over the past year about us spending too much money on our ground game. We've spent the time and the energy and the resources to build that we think we would need leading up to and including Election Day. And I think we'll have hit the nail on the head come Election Day based on what we needed to turn out.
We'll see next Tuesday. But look, Colorado, Democrats have been active for the last 4 years, got a huge thing proclaiming how many headquarters they've got, and the Republicans are beating them with a larger number of early voters, whereas 4 years ago the Republicans were behind in the early vote. So, you know, the Republicans do have an advantage that makes their ground game cost less. For whatever reason, the Republicans have a larger pool of ready party volunteers. Both sides are going to have ground games. Both of them have approached it in a different way. Both of them have the same set of goals at the end of the day. And we'll see next Tuesday, actually we'll see next Wednesday or Thursday, which one has the best ground game in these critical battleground states.
And that was our invitation of the second debate.
Yeah, we're going to do the second debate.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if you look in the closing days of these races, it's not just candidate ads anymore. There's a flood of outside ads and outside money coming into the race. I think in the end, the president's campaign will be able to survive a lot of ads that will come in at the last minute. The campaign does not take political action committee money. We have largely an affiliated super PAC that officials will raise money for, but not raise money for the undisclosed side.
In 2010, he went to Towson State and called these kind of groups enemies of democracy, and then when it became apparent that he could, benefit by having one was set up by former Deputy Roberts, who's Bill Burton, who's been running around. So I guess they were enemies of democracies before he had one, but now that he's got one, they're no longer enemies of democracy.
We saw the size of the enemies of democracy and figured out we need to get a little of that democracy.
On the other hand,
Or a
we
little
didn't-
bit of that.
Yeah, on the other hand, I don't think we've ever seen them as enemies, but as political opponents. But it was an interesting choice of language by the current president, soon to be the former president.